What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Every now and then you get smacked in the face with some wild Pokemon numbers, like the fact that Dunsparce is apparently as big as Salamence. But what can really blow your mind is looking through and comparing Pokemon stats, because it doesn't take long at all before you start to notice some things are out of place. Like Bramblegast, for instance. This spooky tumbleweed is a decent Pokemon with a unique ability, and hey, 90 speed ain't bad, but its highest stat is actually its attack at 115. That's a bit odd by itself, since Ghost isn't all that physical, despite what earlier generations might have you believe, but it's even crazier when you compare Bramblegast to other Pokemon, because 115 is fairly high, easily putting it in the top third of all Pokemon attack stats. And then you get into specific examples like Iron Treads below it. That's right, the mechanized robot version of a rolling elephant is physically weaker than a dead weed. I don't know how that's even possible, but let me just ask you, which would you rather have run into you? A metal steamrolling pachyderm from the future, or a plant withered to the point that it broke off in a light breeze? I truly have no idea how this stacks up unless those decaying branches are triple reinforced somehow by the spirit inhabiting it, but I still don't see a way that Iron Treads could be beaten in an arm wrestling contest with this ethereal ball of thorns. Not that either of them have arms, but what actually turned me onto this topic was once again Ambipom. I've made no secret that I appreciate this purple monkey more than most people, but what surprised me is just how fast it was. Granted, a 115 speed stat isn't gonna break any records, but once again, that is squarely above average. And I wouldn't even find it that odd for it to be that fast, but when you realize that means it's faster than Thundurus and Tornadus, it really makes you wonder how. I mean, these are legendary Pokemon, and even more of note, they don't actually have legs. They ride on clouds to get around, so the laws of friction don't even apply, yet somehow they get outsped by this primate's stubby legs. Now, I will say that at least Therian Tornadus does outspeed Ambipom, since it would be extra embarrassing to grow wings and still not be fast enough, and maybe it's just me, but I find it quite funny to imagine Ambipom racing on foot past these flying forces of nature. Maybe it rotates its tails in comically large circles like the Roadrunner or something. Next, I wanted to highlight the oft-overlooked Lantern. This Gen 2 angler had more than just the water-electric type to boast, because its HP stat is crazy. There's no reason why a random fish should have 125 HP when most things have half that much at that stage in the game. For reference, that is higher than the Pokemon God Arceus, whose HP is only 120. So Lantern has more health than the creator of the universe, meaning that it can sit there soaking up hits for days. But beyond that, it even beats out other Pokemon that you may think of as bulky psychic types like Musharna at 116, or even Reuniclus at 110. So if you've ever used a Lantern or faced off against one, you'll know just how long it takes to whittle one down, standing far too close to other Pokemon that are known for their bulk. But speaking of Reuniclus, I found its stats interesting as well, mostly because of what it lacks, namely its special attack. You might say that's wrong because special attack is the green blob's defining trait, but that's the point. As impressive as that 125 is, it didn't actually change when it evolved at all. Duosion is the one that reached those heights first, and then its evolution just plateaued and didn't even try to improve its best area, like it was cool to just coast on its past success. I know that Scizor doesn't grow its stats from Scyther either, but at least it moves them around, whereas Reuniclus invested anywhere but its special attacking power. So you might as well use a Duosion with an Eviolite instead. But what about the other side in special defense? This one is a bit more nebulous anyway, but you cannot tell me that there is any way we are expected to believe that Ledian excels in special defense. Speed? Maybe I could see that. Attack? Could have been, if only, but what about a frail little insect causes you to say, yeah, it should be able to shrug off ghosts and dragons no problem? Now, it is only 101 in special defense, so it's not breaking the bank, but that's on par with Snorlax. I can think of no Earth in which it makes sense for a hulking titan and a spindly ladybug to be equal in any kind of defense, let alone to have it be above any others. And the worst part is probably that it doesn't even make a difference because Ledian still dies at the drop of a hat anyway. But while we're talking about special bugs, I was quite impressed with the Yanmega. I had no idea that it was so heavily invested in special attack. I guess I kind of misused mine back when I gave it mostly physical moves. At least Ancient Power still got to have the full effect on the special side. And the same thing with Yanma. I never would have predicted that was its focus. But I guess that helps to justify using them outside of the other bug and flying types. To impress upon you how high that is, that puts Yanmega above other electric powerhouses of Johto, and it beats out not only Delphox, a fire and psychic mage that uses blazing magical attacks, but also Toxtricity. You know, the only Pokemon to bring together the largely special poison and electric types, who also deals with sound so much that they had to invent a signature ability to crank up its power, basically giving it 3 types? Yeah, Yanmega is still somehow stronger than these Pokemon. Apparently it doesn't even need to have the dragon type at all because it easily makes its own mark. Now some of these may be explained away, but one that truly baffles me is Leafeon. The much-awaited grass evolution was a welcome addition to complete the starter types. However, why is its defense its best stat? And how is it up at 130 no less? Does it have some serious tree bark under that fur? I know that each of the evolutions had their own area of specialty to stand apart. Vaporeon had HP, Jolteon had speed, and so on, but who decided to give defense to the grass type? I would have thought Glaceon would have been better off there since most of Ice's weaknesses are physical, while the grass threats lean a bit more special, so it doesn't even benefit Leafeon as much as, say, Umbreon's special defense. But then you look at what's below it, and you just gotta scratch your head at how a Komala is only at 125 defense when it is covered in hard plates of armor that are notoriously strong. And somehow even lower than that is Chestnut. If one grass Pokemon were going to have sky-high defenses, you would think it would be the one that canonically can withstand a tank. But somehow we're expected to buy that Leafeon has more defense. I think it's only fair that if you can stand your ground against a train that you get to have higher defense than a cat thing made out of leaves, but hey, maybe I'm old-fashioned. But if we're talking about undeserved defenses, we have to mention Cryogonal. This serrated snowflake is disappointing in a lot of ways, but it turns out special defense is not one of them. Who knew that this single-stage ice type had a whopping 135 on the special side? No, seriously, I want to know if anybody knew that. This puts Cryogonal ahead of bulky Pokemon like Sylveon and even legendaries like Latias and Uxie, and even more legendaries across the board. You're telling me that some jagged frozen water can hold up to an energy blast better than a majestic creature of legend? I feel like regular defense might have made more sense, but it just goes to show you should make sure you're never caught off guard from not checking the stats. Like with Poltegeist. I was quite shocked when I saw this haunted teapot had a 134 special attack. I'm fine with it being a good attacker, but why is it so high? Once again, that means Poltegeist has more offensive potential than the likes of Gengar and Espeon, and it likewise exceeds legendary Pokemon, most of whom are famous for their capacity to pump out an excessive amount of elemental powers. Is it just a reference to the pressure of boiling tea water? Because that is the only thing that I could think of to justify why the spirit of Mrs. Potts hits harder on the special side than so many other Pokemon that make more sense to do so. But then there's the opposite direction with Noivern, whose special attack is far too low. Just by looking at it, you would suspect a dragon whose primary weapons are the speakers attached to its head to be able to use them effectively. I'm not even saying that it shouldn't have speed as Noivern's best quality, but the special attack needs a buff, because that is putting it well below the likes of Blaziken, who seems far more on the physical side, and other random Pokemon that you don't even think of as special like Samurott, Victreebel, and Seviper. Although maybe the worst is Honchkrow. When thinking about a special flying type to add to your team, apparently you'll get better mileage out of this mobster crow than you will out of the much more suitable Noivern, which is frankly insane. But of course, no list of this sort would be complete without talking about Weezing, because it is utterly ridiculous. This mutated ball of concentrated pollutants is a decent Pokemon for sure, but who signed off on it having a 120 in physical defense? If that were Muck, I would understand, because they have gone out of their way to portray how little direct contact affects it, but no, Muck opts for special defense instead. I would honestly swap them because I could buy Weezing standing out on the special side more. I mean, unless its outer shell is made of some super rare gemstone composite that's harder than diamond. But even then, it can't be too thick because it's pure gas on the inside. So something doesn't line up here. That puts Weezing with much higher defense than Bronzong, and even noticeably higher than Duraludon. You know, the Steel-type Pokemon so durable they decided it needed to be a key feature of its name. Weezing being so dominant in this area is honestly a bit unsettling, meaning that you'll just have to stare into their faces even longer to know that they're in pain just from being alive. And the other Pokemon that solidified this idea for me was Malamar. This upside-down squid may surprise you with how strong it is, having an attack of 92. True, that's not a blowout or anything, but it's a psychic and dark type that's best known for its mind-controlling abilities, which doesn't exactly evoke the image of an old-timey strongman. And it's even more outlandish when seeing that makes it higher than Lugia. I know that Lugia isn't usually known for its brute strength either, but it is a legendary Pokémon, so it really ought to be able to beat out a random piece of mental calamari. Seriously, how much power are they packing into those tentacles anyway? Next, I wanted to point to Passimian, who only has an 80 base speed stat, which was quite disgraceful to me because this is an athlete Pokemon built to play sports, so you would think that he could run some pretty fast plays, but no, instead this primate player gets outsped by a lot of other Pokemon like Magby of all things. That's right, a lumpy baby Pokemon can beat out a professional in a foot race. That also puts Passimian behind the likes of Volbeat and Girafarig, who are not quite known for being fleet-footed, but they still somehow put the football monkey to shame. However, maybe you would say that Passimian is a linebacker and is supposed to be a bit more hefty and slower, but then that flies in the face of other Pokemon who are exactly the opposite, like Durant. You would expect a metal ant to be weighed down significantly, since once again their durability was so central to this Pokemon's identity that they put it in the name, but apparently it is such a lightweight armor exoskeleton that they can zip around as fast as they please ahead of other speedy Pokemon that are commonly depicted as quite fast. I mean, that is a good 10 points faster than Sharpedo, who was the quick option for surfing in how many games? But I guess all we required was a Durant to get around faster on the waters, since it beats out even Mega Sharpedo for speed. And perhaps most ludicrous of all, Rapidash is even slower than Durant as well. You know, that Pokemon named for how rapidly it dashes everywhere, pretty much always depicted as incredibly swift anytime it pops up? That blisteringly fast horse comes up short against Durant somehow, along with so many other Pokemon traditionally portrayed as faster. But hey, I guess now we know how they get away from Heatmor so easily. But of course, there are nearly infinite curiosities when it comes to comparing Pokemon stats, like say Tentacool having higher special defense than the Gen 6 Kalos mascots, or Komala somehow having more physical attack than Arcanine, and a plethora of other conventionally burly Pokemon. So, which statistical disparities stand out most to you? Are you a huge fan of Wormadam's special defense? Let me know down in the comments. Also, be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.